Today I'm making cornbread. Now, I grew up in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, and so I didn't have southern cornbread, that's made in the cast iron. You start with the cornmeal mush. There's no flour, there's no sugar. That's a very distinctive type of southern cornbread. That's not what I grew up with. I grew up with sweet and cakey, and so that's what I'm gonna make today. Now, it starts with a little bit of buttermilk. That's just a cup of buttermilk. And I love the method for this cornbread because it's so simple. You whisk the wet together, you whisk the dry together, and you combine them, throw it in the oven. So this is the wet ingredients. Into the buttermilk goes 2 eggs. All right, now the honey. Now the honey is the sweetener in this sweet cornbread, and we're gonna use a whopping 2/3 of a cup of honey. And believe it or not, it's sweet cornbread, but it's not achingly sweet, because honey just isn't as sweet as sugar. So to measure the honey, I'm using this fantastic adjustable measuring cup, which just makes measuring sticky things like honey really easy. All right, so that's 2/3 of a cup. And this is why I love this thing. Into the bowl it goes. No mess, no fuss. I know, it's the little things, right? Last but not least, some butter. And here I have 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's been melted and cooled in my little butter melting pot. Add that to all the wet ingredients. Now just whisk it together. Now you really want to whisk this well because you want to dissolve all that honey and it'll stick to the bottom of the bowl. So take your time here, really make sure that honey is dissolved into the liquid. And you notice I'm using an oversized mixing bowl. That's by design because I usually make a good mess. But when you're whisking something like this, it's nice to have a little extra room. Oh, that honey smells good. All right, so set the wet ingredients aside. Now time to work on the dry ingredients. And as always, when baking, I like to weigh everything. It's just faster and easier. And as I mentioned, this is a northern style sweet cornbread, which means it's a combination of flour and cornmeal. So it's about half and half, a little bit extra flour compared to cornmeal. It's 1 1/4 cups of flour to 1 cup of cornmeal. But in weights, that's 6 1/4 ounces, nailed it, and 5 ounces of cornmeal. Now you can really use any brand of cornmeal you like. I like the more coarsely ground cornmeal because I like those gritty, chewy bits in the finished bread. But if you use a finer grind, it still works just as well. There we go, 5 ounces. Now for some leavener, because this is essentially a quick bread. So we're gonna use a combination of baking powder and baking soda. So starting with the baking powder, it's a teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of table salt, and last but not least, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And that's it. So easy. So you want to whisk the dry ingredients together. And that's pretty good. Now wet into dry. Get all of that out of there. Now you just stir them together till there are no lumps. A few lumps are okay. I'm never worried about over stirring this because again, it's a combination of flour and cornmeal, so you're never gonna build up too much gluten. And you can see right away that buttermilk and those leaveners are starting to create bubbles. That's a good sign. That looks pretty good. Now I'm gonna bake this in a metal 8-inch pan that I've greased already with vegetable oil spray. And I like using metal pans here. One, because I like the straight sides, whereas most glass pans have curved sides. But also the metal pan makes the outside really nice and crisp. And I like those crisp edges. If you do use a glass pan, however, the baking time will be significantly longer by 5 or 10 minutes. There we go. Now this takes about half an hour in the oven, 375 degrees on the middle rack. That cornbread has been in the oven for 30 minutes. Time to take a look. Oh, smells good, doesn't it, Ziggy? Now, to test cornbread for doneness, there's a couple ways to do it. First, I like to use a skewer and poke it in the center spin it a little bit, see if there's any raw batter. So no raw batter, that's a good sign that it's baked through. Also, the browning is a good indicator that it's evenly baked. You can see it as a nice golden brown. Now the last test is when you take your fingers and you press on the outside, because you know it bakes from the outside in, and you can see how it's baked there and you can see how bouncy it is, and then slowly move your finger to the center and you look for that resistance that you feel on the outside in the center. So it's as baked as it is on the outside, it's baked in the center. And this feels perfect. All right, so the cornbread's a little on the delicate side. We're not gonna take it out of the pan yet. Gonna give it 5 or 10 minutes to cool down and set up in the pan before we turn it out. So I'll set this aside. And this has cooled in its pan for 5-10 minutes. Now I'm just gonna turn it out of its pan and let it cool completely. Oh, and you can see that dark golden crust on the outside. That is my favorite part. I'm a cornbread kind of person because I love that dark flavor. It's almost like caramelized honey flavor. Time to start getting everything assembled. I like to cut this into relatively small-ish pieces. You can always go back for seconds if you want a big old piece. Some are bigger than others, aren't they? It's rustic. I'm gonna put the cornbread on a nice platter. Somebody here's cornbread. All right. Might as well make a little plate to taste it. All right, quarter piece of cornbread for me. A little bit of cornbread. Oh, that cornbread has that fragrance finish thanks to the honey. See you next time. Thanks for watching. What'd you think? Leave a comment below and let me know what you're excited to cook this week. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. You can get today's recipes and more for free at our website, americastestkitchen.com/JuliaAtHome.